Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sony Gabriel, and I'll be your organizer for this session. We are excited to have you as we dive into today's topic of generative AI in business lending. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over some housekeeping and best practices to ensure a smooth experience for everyone. The webinar will last approximately 30 minutes, followed by a dedicated Q&A session to address any questions or comments you may have. All participants are muted by default to minimize background noise, but don't worry, we want to hear from you during the Q&A. And during the Q&A session, if you'd like to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand feature, and one of our co-organizers will unmute you and so you can speak. You can also type your questions in the Q&A section at any time during the webinar, and we'll do our best to cover them during the Q&A session. Please note that you won't be able to see other participants, but feel free to engage with the speakers and ask questions. We encourage you to fully participate and make the most out of this session. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to our moderator and host, Barry, and Joe Kurian, who will take it from here. Barry, over to you.
Thanks, Sony. Good morning, everyone. My name is Barry Greenblatt, and I currently serve as an advisor to Trace. Prior to working with Trace, I spent 35 years working in various risk management functions at large financial institutions. Most recently, I managed the enterprise counterparty risk management team at Wells Fargo. I retired from banking about 2 years ago, and since then I've been working with various startup companies and fintech companies where there exists an intersection of cutting-edge technology and its applications to risk management. I met Trace and its co-founders, Sony and Joe, about 18 months ago while volunteering as a mentor in the RevTech Labs Accelerator here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was immediately attracted to Trace's use of large language models and generative AI in portfolio supervision and ongoing risk management. Based on numerous conversations I've had with risk management professionals, I know there is significant interest in understanding the practical applications of AI in the banking space. So it's my pleasure to co-host this webinar and introduce Sony and Joe. Sony Gabriel is the founder and CEO of Trace. He's a seasoned technologist who has implemented several AI solutions for banks and financial institutions. Joe Kurian, founder and chief analytics officer of Trace. Before founding Trace, Joe spent over 20 years in the banking industry, building analytics infrastructure and AI solutions for business lending and risk management verticals. So without any further delay, let me turn the session over to Joe.
So thank you, Barry, for setting the context, and hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on GenAI in business banking. As Barry mentioned, with GenAI making significant waves across industries, there is a growing interest in understanding its practical applications in banking and financial services industry. Many bankers are keen to explore how they can introduce and seamlessly integrate these technologies into their daily workflows to enhance efficiency and also to improve outcomes. And today, we are going to focus on some GenAI solutions that can really help or transform banking operations. For example, offering better customer experience or speeding up loan approvals or monitoring portfolio businesses for risk and compliance. And what's on the screen is an outline of today's webinar. In the next 2 slides, we will delve into the role of conventional AI in banking and also explain how Gen AI has evolved over a period of time. And then we will explore recent adoption of Gen AI in banking. And after that, we will see how Gen AI integrates into a banker's workflow. And we will also look at 3 real world use cases and in the business lending space, and to highlight where Gen AI is making an impact. And finally, we will wrap up by discussing some of the key challenges in this space. So As an introduction, AI is nothing new to bankers. This Venn diagram helps in understanding various technologies developed over a period of time. And so when people talk about AI, they could be talking about any of these subsets, and it's sometimes very confusing. So to make it little more clear, anything inside this Venn diagram is technically AI. So deep learning, representation learning, machine learning, and knowledge bases are all key approaches within AI technology that evolved over a period of time. So what is more interesting is bankers started with the knowledge bases or expert system way back in 1980s. For example, Citibank used a rule-based expert system to automate underwriting and also to speed up the loan approval process. And this was followed by uh, a development of more advanced credit scoring models like the FICO score in 1989, a very popular machine learning model that used logistics regression to predict customer payment delinquency. And this was followed by a neural network or a fraud detection model by MasterCard in 1990s, which is a kind of a representation learning, and that was followed by various deep learning techniques like natural language processing in 2010, doing things like sentiment analysis or deep learning for computer vision. So AI might seem like the latest buzzword, but bankers have been using it for decades. So in fact, AI is older than many of us in this audience. So why do we hear a lot about AI in last 2 years, and especially since the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022? The answer is it has to do with the recent developments in the deep learning in last 10 years. And let's take a quick look at that development next. And this slide summarizes the evolution of deep learning to Gen AI that happened in last 10 years. In 2012, AlexNet, the deep learning revolution, really took off when AlexNet, a type of neural network, won the ImageNet competitions. And that just showed how powerful deep learning could be for tasks like image classification. And in 2017, another big thing happened, like Google researchers introduced transformers architecture, and this was like a breakthrough that led to the development of large language models and generative AI. And in November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT that widely popularized LLMs and generative AI models. After that, OpenAI, Meta, Google, and many other companies released their own Gen AI models, and number of companies started developing generative AI solutions around these models. So, question is, what is a generative AI model, right? Most of us are very familiar with traditional models like FICO scores or PD scorecards, and they are called a discriminative AI model. And these models are great at classification or predictions, like determining whether a customer might default a loan or likelihood of responding to an email campaign. So Gen AI models work slightly differently, like we experience in ChatGPT. It generates new content. So it can write a working Python code, for example, right? And or it revises our long email messages, or it can easily summarize a long compliance document. So the excitement around AI these days is all about this subset of deep learning. After more than a decade of progress, what was once known only to the technologists is now available to the professionals in a wide range of industries. And that is what is making it so exciting. So the key takeaway from the last two slides is that if you hear about an AI product claiming to solve a banking issue, be sure to check whether it is a generative AI product or a discriminative or conventional AI product. And just to make sure that they are not repackaging them as something brand new. So going on to the next, uh, you know, the adoption for Gen AI in banking sector. So let's look at the most recent Moody's survey to see how banks are adopting Gen AI technologies in their workflows, right? The left-hand side diagram shows that adoption in banking is pretty low, with almost 80% responding that not at all or rarely use they not at all or rarely use Gen AI in their work. But you can also see the sectors like professional services are much better in adoption. So we also hear that the major concerns for banks are data security, privacy, and compliance, which probably is less of a concern for other sectors, so helping the adoption a little bit better there. So on the right-hand side, let's look at some of the recent success stories from banking and financial services sector. As you probably already experienced, that the most widely adopted application is a virtual assistant. Say, for example, Wells Fargo's virtual assistant called Fargo. Since launching in March 2023, it handled 20 million customer interactions and is on track to reach 100 million interactions annually. And Fargo is powered by Google's Palm 2, and it helps Wells Fargo customers with a variety of everyday banking tasks like checking balances, payment due dates, credit scores, and paying bills, etc. And this tremendously improved their capability to engage customers. Another example here is the Airwallex, a global payments company. They rolled out a Gen AI copilot to streamline their Know Your Customer KYC assessments and onboarding. And the company claims that this new tool has cut false positive rates by alerts by 50% and improved the enhancing process. Prior to this, Ray relied on rule-based analytics and NLP to go through the customers' websites and other submitted documents, which often led to a lot of false alarms and that they had to manually review. So, and later, like MasterCard introduced a new Gen AI model designed to help banks spot suspicious transactions more effectively. And according to them, this technology could boost fraud detection rates by at least 20% and as high as 60%. And model is trained on 125 billion transactions that pass through their network each year. And most interesting and most recent one is JP Morgan Chase rolling out an OpenAI powered assistant to all of its staff. And more than 60,000 employees already have access to the program. And they call it like a LLM suite. And this is a very powerful assistant. For example, their analytics and IT groups can significantly reduce the time they spend on coding, or associates can spend less time on preparing documents, presentations, and even reports. And all this means that you can probably use the same team to deliver a lot more productivity. So look at the many different ways businesses are using these technologies now. And Wells Fargo application is a customer facing and able to serve millions of customers 24/7. And for JP Morgan Chase, it is boosting their internal efficiency. And these are just few examples of how banks are using Gen AI. So the question is, what else can we achieve with this technology, right? And a lot of companies around the world are working on various Gen AI applications, and that means these technologies are increasingly accessible to smaller players. In the next few slides, I will quickly show how these applications fit into a banker's workflow, and I will also walk you through some of the use cases. So we will now look at how these Gen AI applications fit into a typical bank's workflow. So imagine a bank has different data streams coming from core systems like Jack Henry, loan origination systems like Encino, and credit bureau information from Experian. And all this data is stored in a cloud data hub, and then bank uses a decision engine software to analyze it. So these decision engines such as Provenir or Amazon SageMaker, take in the data, verify it, calculate scores, and help make decisions like whether to approve a loan or not. And Banks may also use tools like Jira or ServiceNow as service applications in their workflow to review decisions made by decision engine or to look at the reports. So as you can see, decision engine is an important piece of software that does data orchestration, scoring, and also it hosts production models. So all the legacy AI models typically remain in this box. So now, where does the Gen AI come into play? So it can fit into two different ways. One, through a specialized application vendor, like companies like Trace or Plaid, uses Gen AI to process data and provide insight through an API. And these APIs feed data into their bank's decision engine. And secondly, the banks can use Gen AI directly. Banks can just develop their own Gen AI applications that sits in the decision engine and which communicates with the large language models here. And this is just one way to visualize how Gen AI can fit into a bank's infrastructure. There are many different ways banks do it now. And now let's explore how it will look from a typical user's perspective. Say, uh, so this is a typical system user, right? A bank associate or an officer interacts with the Gen AI applications here. What's inside this cloud trace is a GenAI application, and I just wanted to show it as an example. So this could be any vendor developed application or internal application that sits in the cloud. So now imagine a standalone application like what you see in this case, and you log in using your credentials. Platform kind of perform tasks like monitoring vendors or checking scores or downloading certain reports, and then you will upload those reports into your case management system or workflow system. So good thing with this approach is that it is very quick to implement and works best for solutions involving public data. And however, keep in mind that it doesn't really integrate well with your enterprise or workflow systems. And the second approach here is the API integration route, and is a more tighter integration with your systems, whereas the decision engine talks to the cloud application, the GenAI application, and integrate with your case management system. And obviously, this is more flexible and offer ability to integrate with your internal systems and metrics pretty easily. And the third is the in-house development is most desirable, but also unfortunately takes a lot longer. A GenAI application sits inside the decision engine or one of the systems, and this could be a vendor based or also your own internally developed system. And you have a much better control over integration and blending with other metrics and other things. So in the context of Gen AI, this approach is less forward because it is tough to keep up with constant tech updates. And as you know, companies are releasing new and improved large language models very frequently. And locking into just one could be a costly decision down the road. So that said, I just want to share some experiences we had with our own banking clients. Like one is a federal agency, and they just opted for in-house integration because all their systems are on premise and in the private cloud. And also the previous slide we show the JP Morgan LLM suite example, right? We discussed in page 4, and that is another example of a tight in-house development. So we also have a bank that uses the standalone web application because they just want to monitor their solar and auto dealers and don't want to really go through their own IT implementation process, which takes months in the priority list, whereas we could just go on production within weeks. So they just decided to go with the standalone, which is like a web application with all kinds of utilities there. But many of them choose the API integration route because we do the heavy lifting on the side and it keeps the technology up to date. But at the same time, the product is integrated well within their own system. So that certainly is a favored method. And also another point to note is that you don't have to be as big as Chase or Wells Fargo to be an early adopter of these technologies, because companies like Trace simplifies it for community banks and credit unions, and we do the heavy lifting, and you can just do the API integration route. I know I just rushed the last two slides a bit, but if you all have any questions, please put that in the chat, and Barry and Sony will be happy to answer them, live. So now let's look at some of the use cases. So we briefly discussed some Gen AI products in slide 5, but so here I want to highlight some specific business banking use cases and mention a couple of vendors, because who are already working with banks. As you know, there are a lot of tech companies offering Gen AI solutions, and most of them are still in that idea stage, right? So, but I picked a couple of Gen AI solutions and vendors that banks are adopting widely to solve various problems using Gen AI. For example, Decipher AI focuses on extracting and analyzing data from documents like tax forms and invoices, and also with very very increased accuracy compared to previous times. And then another vendor, Cascading AI, their product is called Casca, offers a next generation loan origination system for banks and credit unions. And now imagine a small business owner, right, looking for a working capital loan. He goes to the bank's website at a non-working hour. The Gen AI system quickly engages him and collecting and verifying documents like application, financial statements, tax returns, and business licenses, etc. And within minutes, the system analyzes the data and provides an initial decision on whether the business is likely to qualify for the loan or not. And the advantage here is that the only high quality leads that meet the bank's criteria are flagged for a follow up by a loan officer, and saving time and also ensuring that resources are focused on the most promising applicants. And so applications like Casca Loan Assistant claims to handle customer inquiries 24 by 7, with 60% happening after regular office hours. And they have seen up to 70% lead conversions. And thanks to the Gen AI and the automatic follow-ups and automatic reminders for uploading documents, etc. And loan processing is faster too, cutting cycle times by 5 days with the automated Know Your Business KYB and initial credit analysis and spreading carried out by AI agents. And Cascading AI says they deploy really fast. As little as like 2 weeks they can deploy, and with integration into private cloud or non prem systems, right? And as you can see, the Gen AI is in the loop at various steps of a loan origination systems, applications to processing to underwriting, stepping in for humans, but with much more efficiently. And we all know it takes weeks now how to disburse a business loan, and it can be significantly reduced with the Gen AI as a co-pilot on our side. And the next use case is a business lending portfolio monitoring. This is where another area Gen AI proved to be very helpful. As you know, business lending is, business lending usually focuses on origination quality of the loan. The underwriters do everything to ensure that the best customers are on books, so it's less trouble in the future, right? So it is also true that most of the banks have very strong relationship banking, and so any early warnings or red flags for the future loan delinquency could actually help mitigate losses. So right now most of the loan portfolio monitoring systems leverage on a monthly bureau data and or like a quarterly or annual financial statements, and this is quite delayed because it's too late to go after a customer who is already delinquent, right? So I think according to Gartner, uh, 90% of the data generated around a business is unstructured, and they are in various documents, news, social media sites like Yelp, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Better Business Bureau. And but bankers still use the structured data from bureaus and quarterly financial statements to make most of the decisions. So The Gen AI and large language models can process this unstructured data much more efficiently and extract intelligence before it is too late. And Gen AI solutions like Trace or Bit4 or Axon could help in setting up a daily monitoring of every business in a loan portfolio. And such proactive risk monitoring is not only helping in mitigating losses within the portfolio, but it's also helped prove to the regulators like OCC or FDIC that you have a better control over the portfolio. And going on to the next use case, that is third party risk monitoring and risk management and vendor monitoring cases, which are really hot topic right now. Many recent regulatory actions on community banks are related to TPRM, and problems with the fintech partnerships and not monitoring partners closely have been cited by OCC and FDIC, and that is prompting the banks to strengthen their vendor risk monitoring. So, on a positive note, companies like Vistic are stepping up with Gen AI technology to automate and simply simplify the third-party risk assessments. And they offer real-time monitoring of a vendor's security postures and provide alerts about any potential risk as soon as they come up. And Trace also helps banks in this area. A small bank here in California is using us to monitor all their vendors daily, not just vendors, but also their suppliers and community organizations they partner with, just to understand their social standing and reputation. And they said once FDIC was on site for audits and they presented the solution to FDIC as part of the vendor monitoring, and they received pretty good positive feedback from the regulators. So things like continuous monitoring of a vendor or business was quite difficult before, but AI seems to simplify these manual steps and consolidate signals from various sources easily. So, for example, you can gather news about data leaks, gather various consumer reviews, and extract discussions in Reddit or Facebook or even the stuff from dark web. And using a large language model, one can summarize and quantify all that into a time series scorecard, like FICO, for example, FICO for business, right? So now you can monitor a business using that scorecard, and then any drop in a score can be investigated on a daily basis, all without a human in the loop. So, frankly, this was not possible this easily a couple of years ago. So, coming to the last page, I think what really worries bankers in what are the challenges in a highly regulated environment, right? So, what really worries bankers in the US is transparency and regulatory compliance, right? These are also the top concerns for any manager who wants to adopt Gen AI in their workflow. Out of all the concerns, bias and algorithm is the most discussed, and Gen AI models are very large and ingest books and Wikipedia and news as their training data. And it is possible that it can unintentionally reflect bias that are hidden in historic documents. Remember, in conventional AI, we had better control over the input, so we could decide what goes into the model. But that's not the case anymore. So this leads to the transparency problem, where these models are like black boxes, meaning their decision-making processes are not easily understood or transparent. So also there is this issue of data privacy and security compromised while interacting with such models. Like if you send a bunch of stuff to ChatGPT, it is out of your network and it could be a classified information, right? So, and all these 3 points are relevant for regulatory compliance. US has one of the strictest regulations around lending money, and especially small business lending is regulated just like consumers. And fair lending laws, Regulation B, and GDPR, all that apply here. So compliance officers and risk managers are still figuring out what is the right model governance practices, and the certainly it is delaying the adoption of this technology. So there is a lot of improvement in this areas of making it less biased and more transparent, which certainly is more for another discussion. But until now, we were talking about Gen AI in the loop, but this is where we need more human in the loop approach, right? We can provide the necessary oversight by monitoring decisions, deploying error corrections, and also bring empathy and judgment to the process. And that can also ensure a more balanced approach. A big point to note here is that none of the above points are new to bankers, right? And they were dealing with all of them in the conventional AI world for decades. So this is another evolution in the technology, and new ways to address it are also emerging. So with that, I pause here, and we will open the floor for Q&A. Thanks for listening, and we hope to answer any questions you may have in the next few minutes.
Joe, I've also just started a poll just to understand the audience and the understanding or the familiarity of Gen AI in the business lending sector. There are a couple of other polls that we'll run during the course of the Q&A as well. But Joe, there is a question from Teresa, which is, and I'll just read it out here for everyone. How are you addressing those challenges? I believe, let me just unmute Teresa so she can ask. Teresa, I've unmuted you. I'm unmuting everyone right now so we can keep it. I think it'll be easier to ask questions.
Sure. Thank you guys, and this was great. I was, always looking at the risk and the concerns because it is such a conservative industry. How are you addressing these challenges when you sit down and talk with your potential clients?
Yeah. This, I think, the primary thing is most of our clients have a model governance, right? Model governance committee that typically their area to address these challenges. And like I mentioned, there is a set process, established process for conventional AI, the scorecards and all kinds of internal models. There is a very established process. And things like, say, for example, Reg B and things, we do test on the side, saying, run the parallel test to see whether the algorithm is creating any bias in discriminating, certain sections of people with others, or age discrimination, or things of that nature. So now, similar, developments are happening in case of large language models as well, generative AI as well. There are, a lot of transparency being brought in by various algorithms. So there are ways to do that now, and what we see is model governance committees are adopting those techniques so that they can explain better and bring more transparency. And then they are also insisting the vendors to provide transparency. For example, Trace, we've been always asked to give what is that going into these models, right? So now we provide a full list. Say, for example, now we are going to say various websites, various discussion forums and news channels, and it could be like thousands of sources we go to, right? And we display them all, and we also give the final URL so that the users can actually see what is that piece of text that went into the scoring model, and that way the full transparency is provided. So it's both ways. From an algorithm side, they really set up their own, improve their processes to make it transparent from an algorithm standpoint, and also demanding vendors to provide transparency as much as possible, so that rolls up into their own overall governance.
Thank you. Yep, that's good.
Hi, Jimmy. You should be able to talk.
Hi. How do you handle a lot of concerns with AI are obviously about transparency, right? And that's why OCC and others come down is like they're not a fan of black boxes, but more importantly, how do you guard against bias, right? That's a big issue with UDAP.
Yeah, I think Jamie, I think the at the algorithm level, I think you probably are following some of the developments in that area, right? So one way to do that is have a parallel system running, right? Say for example, and these are all again practices I have seen, right? I mean, you have like a Gen AI system or a neural network system in place, and then probably you can have a conventional system like a say logistics regression system running in parallel and see how the outcomes are. Are they very different? If they are different, very different, we know what goes into a conventional model, what variables are causing it, and then if Gen AI comes with entirely different thing, then it merits certain investigation, right? So that is again a starting point for research, more like a diagnosis. Uh, you know, Logistics regression is one example, but there could be algorithms like that running on the side to give more transparency in the development stage of the when we do the model developments. Now, if you are buying off the shelf products, we could insist similar tests from the vendor itself, right? So the vendors can provide us certain documents to ensure this kind of bias is not there, or bias test like rugby test and those kind of things we can do. We can demand that. So, and there are processes, established processes to do that. So I think it will be fair to ask them to provide certain details on that.
I would encourage you guys. Thank you. That's helpful. And thank you for your time today to go through this. You guys might want to, especially if you're doing lending, there's a company called Fair Play AI that helps to evaluate fairness in lending. They have tools. So something for you guys to consider.
Okay, cool.
And one thing to mention here, Jamie, like where Trace operates in this monitoring of the portfolio, and we are not really into the underwriting part.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
Steered away from underwriting, and it's portfolio monitoring. That's a use case that we focus on.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Are there any other questions? Yes, Teresa, 1 second. Yeah, you should be able to speak now.
Yeah, I'm still unmuted. Yeah, I just wanted to. This is not new. I mean, you guys have been in business for a while, but it is kind of new in a sense for the majority of people. So wondering. Where do you think the best place to encourage education and bringing more transparency, so to speak, in how this technology works and helping leadership, helping the people who are going to use this every day to better understand it, so that we can move forward and get beyond the concerns that are out there now.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it, and maybe Barry can add a little bit later. So, this, I think, from a training education standpoint, one of the hurdles is model governance, right? Within the company, because we traditionally see it as a biggest risk, because we, internal teams develop models or adopt models. They do, say for example, if they are hiring a vendor to do the things and they develop the models, we try to adopt it, do the testing and everything. Everything works kind of okay, but the next step is the model governance. Now they are very conservative by nature, because that's their job, right? They are preparing us for regulators like OCC or FDIC comes into the site and audit us. So they are kind of responsible to ensure that okay, we are on track. There's no bias, no nothing, right? So so they are by design is conservative. So I think a lot of education opportunities within the company, kind of sharing this knowledge, bringing the transparency from a algorithm or technology standpoint, and training them, because we will assume that they would know more, but in reality, it always kind of training is required in every team. So model governance is the first target for us to do more education from a adoption standpoint, making them comfortable that okay, what is your risk guardrails, right? Something goes wrong, what is the next step, right? So all that kind of training needs to be rolled out within the organization, from an adoption standpoint. And then senior leadership, typically what I've seen is kind of dialed in because they go to various conferences. They are kind of dialed into new technology, so they kind of encourage people. But typically, the guardrails within the company is what needs more training and education. And I don't know, Barry wants to add something more to that.
That definitely makes sense. Thank you.
No, I think that's a great question. I think I'd make two comments. The first is, looking at the slide that's up there now, these 5 bullet points are kind of standard things that banks are used to doing and thinking about. So many institutions already have the framework to incorporate the new technology and should be, as best they can, trying to normalize the review of AI applications, much the way they do other new technologies and have historically done so. In terms of training, personally, I'm looking towards some of the industry associations to help out there. I recently signed up for a brand new training course, virtual training course that the Global Association of Risk Professionals, or GARP, is providing. They just released it in August. I've not yet started my training, so I can't tell you if it's good or bad. But I imagine some of the other the industry groups, similar to GARP, Risk Management Association or RMA, might be good places to start with some foundational training, dealing with a lot of the issues that Joe has addressed in this presentation and some of the issues that came up in Q&A.
Thank you.
Raj, I see that you're unmuted. Any questions?
Yeah, just a quick comment, I would say. I want to thank, certainly, Joe, thank you for this very nice presentation, very insightful. The question I have is, I mean, most of the issues that you shared on the last slide are, I think, issues that probably are more relevant when you are doing underwriting, or you are, going into the vendor assessment processes, right? But in the monitoring phase, I presume that these are less impactful. Would that be a fair statement? Has that been your experience as well?
No, Raj, I think you're right. I think underwriting is the most focused area for regulators, right? And especially loan approvals and other things. And in small businesses, especially, they are kind of regulated like consumer. So focus is all there. So that's the one reason we focused on portfolio monitoring first, where such kind of hard decisions are not taken, right? So you always have a human in the loop. So you create alerts, you generate alerts using this large language models and other things, but it always goes through a relationship management before you terminate a loan, or terminate a line of credit or things like that. So I think this is a less of an issue in portfolio monitoring, and more for the origination. So so I think that's one reason we focused on this. Yeah.
But just to add there as well, Raj, like when we talk about AI models, even if it's monitoring, the transparency is always a key question, right? Talking about any AI models, they like it to be, they don't want it to be black box models where there's no explainability provided. So from that standpoint, when you look at it, the transparency with which we create a score is it's actually helpful to actually divulge that. And of course, the bias in algorithms, like you don't want like two articles of similar nature giving two different results. So those kind of things still play a part, but not so much as like Joe added, like from an underwriting standpoint. But privacy and security, since we're dealing with public data, we haven't encountered so much of an issue. But the minute we include internal data, so Joe talked about three models. One, using it as an independent external system, where you may not see a lot of these challenges. But the minute it gets into the tight integrated model, then some of these concerns will be there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we wind up the seminar? Thanks everyone for participating in today's webinar. We will be conducting such webinars, so this is just the start. It's also, so we didn't actually go full-fledged. We did kind of like a soft launch, reaching out to people that we know. We will be conducting similar webinars in the future, and we'll keep everyone posted. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Recordings will be available to everyone after the webinar. Thanks, everyone. Good.